I'm Steve Johnson, News Director for theDove TV. Check out our other videos and visit our website at thedove.us. Thanks.
Well, welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and I'm really honored to have a very special person in the studio with us today. Dr. John Forsyth with us, and he's one of the speakers at a series of lectures that is going on over at the Smullen Center. And today's topic is one that I think sooner or later you are touched with in your family or somebody close, and that's the subject of dementia. Now, if I was to read Dr. Forsyth's resume here, it would take all of the show time, but I will say this, that he was named Oregon's Physician of the Year in 1998. He's been practicing for quite a long time here in Southern Oregon, and his passion and compassion for this subject, I think, qualifies him to help us today to understand the whole subject of dementia. So, Dr. Forsyth, nice to have you, friend. Good to see you.
Perry, thank you for having me.
All right. Well, as I said earlier, I don't know if there hasn't been a time in somebody's life or our families that were impacted by this. And your subject will cover how much of this topic? What do you plan to do on Thursday?
We're going to be following the journey of a loving family with two parents who simultaneously developed dementia about 15 years ago, and which was chronicled by a local author, Molly Bess Tinsley, who wrote a book called Entering the Blue Stone about the decline and the death of her parents. So we'll be taking each of those times in their lives over the last 5 to 7 years, and Molly will be reading from her book short passages, and then Dr. Rebecca Hutchinson, who is a local palliative care physician, and myself and Molly will be discussing what that means in terms of this huge epidemic, a tsunami called the silver tsunami of all things, that our culture and our society is experiencing. That 40% of us within the next 20 years, 40% of those who die will have some form of dementia. Whoa. And our society is just simply not prepared to deal with and care for those folks.
Boy, this opens up a ton of questions. Tsunami, so there's been an increase of this.
It is, and it's because dementia is related to aging. And the age at which we die has rapidly increased over the last 50 years, and so the incidence of dementia in its many forms has increased proportionately. So with the baby boomer generation now entering that time, and especially caring for their parents who are at the end of that time, it becomes very relevant for perhaps 40% of us over the next 20 years of our lives.
All right. What is dementia compared to Alzheimer's, and is there a connection?
There is a connection. Dementia is simply an umbrella term that refers to many different causes and many different types of cognitive decline near the end of life. Alzheimer's is the largest of that group, and it counts for about 2/3 of that. There are many other causes for dementia, some of which are reversible, but most of which, and that which we tragically deal with on a day-to-day basis, is not reversible.
We all go into denial with this one, don't we?
Yeah, we do. You know, I think it's an important part of our response to the illness, and it reflects a great many things. Fear that we ourselves or our parents or loved ones will develop this. Lack of knowledge about what's going on and what this may lead to. Lack of understanding about the course of the illness. And particularly lack of understanding about what we as individuals and caring people can do to make the end of life and this long and gradual decline much more tolerable and much more meaningful for the people who are involved.
All right, so how is someone diagnosed with dementia? I mean, what signs, what's the beginning thing you have this disease?
Almost always it has to do with some loss of memory. And when that begins to interfere with the daily functions of daily life, balancing the checkbook or making arrangements to organize one's life, so-called executive function,
right.
Feeding oneself sometimes, taking care of the needs of nature on a daily basis. When this loss of cognitive abilities, loss of memory and so forth, begins to reach a point at which it interferes with those vital functions, then we begin to almost always recognize it. And the word denial is very important because so oftentimes the person themselves and their family and their loved ones, and sometimes even their physicians, will deny that that's happening and find all sorts of excuses to explain why that might be.
How important is it for the patient to know that they have it?
I think that it's important from the standpoint that they understand that this is a progressive illness and that at some point they will become unable to communicate about what their vision is. And so in that regard, it helps while they are still able to know, to make decisions and so forth, to begin to plan for what they would prefer to be the case in the end of their lives, and for the kind of care that they would like. And so often we miss that opportunity.
Yeah, we do.
We also miss the opportunity to say the things that are most meaningful.
Yeah.
And I think that may even be the most important thing.
You know, I marveled at the late President Ronald Reagan when he was diagnosed.
Yes.
He recognized it early, and he said goodbye.
Yes.
I mean, he actually said goodbye to the country and to his family and knew that he had it and went down that road. And I thought, boy, what a lesson to learn from there, because what an opportunity to put your affairs in order, say the things you want to say. And so it's a real reality check for a family to get a hold of.
I think so, and it's so helpful when the person themselves can have that conversation with their family, because so oftentimes younger family members are more in a state of denial about this than the person themselves. And I think Ronald Reagan was a great example of someone who recognized ahead of time, who had those important conversations about the meaning of what he had done and about his relationship to his loved ones. And so I think, that's an important thing.
Does dementia, is it always an elderly disease?
Not always, but predominantly so.
Okay.
So there are people who have early forms of dementia, very tragic onset in their 40s or sometimes 50s. But most of the time it's later in life.
Does it accelerate fast, or is it a long goodbye?
It's a long, for most part, it's a long and gradual progression, usually over 5 to 10 years.
Really?
And therefore, and that's one of the difficult challenges of dealing with it. And it's a gradual thing. So people slide from one level into another as they decline, and oftentimes it's only a specific event, such as an automobile accident or something that that brings it to the attention of their family.
You know, the other part of this, Dr. Forsyth, that's so hard is that a family member who is trying to manage a family member who has this gets frustrated because you don't understand that they don't understand.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's hard to deal with somebody that just doesn't understand, and you want so hard for them to understand the basic logical things, but it doesn't process, does it?
It doesn't process, and I think that's perhaps the greatest challenge in caring for someone who has this, or in living with someone who has this, is to realize that their reality is different than our normal rational reality. The brain is this immensely complex organ, and so decline, and the thing that I think we've learned in the last few years is that decline in one part of the brain, say memory, is oftentimes not matched by the decline in other areas of the brain, so that people whose memory is pretty well gone and are unable to function from the memory standpoint can oftentimes appreciate singing and music
Yeah.
and other parts of their brain that seem to be functioning perfectly well or even be enhanced during this period. Yeah.
What do you plan to say to families and relatives that are trying to manage somebody with it? I mean, what can you give them in the way of encouragement? Because we've been through it in our family.
Yes.
In some ways we still are, but it's amazing to me how we allow ourselves to get frustrated. And we shouldn't do that because it's not their fault.
Yes. Well, I think perhaps there are a couple things in that regard. There are some simple things that we oftentimes don't think about, and physicians are probably the last ones to think about these. That we, as family members, as caring partners of people who are becoming gradually demented, the importance of touch. Personal touch.
Really? A hug?
A hug. Yeah, holding hands. Just a pat is sometimes conveys a meaning and a sense of loving and kindness that all sorts of words, which cannot be processed by the person, can still understand. Singing, reading to the person, just being with the person sometimes, even though no words are exchanged, can be a very meaningful thing and can oftentimes ameliorate and make much more tolerable the behavior of a person.
Because sometimes they become another person. I mean, they can become mean.
Yes.
They can become critical.
Yes.
And that compounds the emotions, doesn't it?
It very much does, and oftentimes behavioral issues are an important part of this decline. And there have been a number of medical studies and caring studies, particularly from Johns Hopkins University Medical School, which has been kind of our nation's leader in understanding about things that we can do to help deal with those emotional ups and downs.
Wow.
And oftentimes it's pretty simple things like touching and reading and singing. The author Rick Steves, who writes about travel, had a recent interview, I think, on ABC TV, in which he talked about his mother becoming demented and what was meaningful to him and what actually worked in terms. And he said that whenever she would get agitated, he would sing to her ropesy dopes and little opes and little anxiety, and she would almost immediately smile and start singing with him and calm down. So learning how to distract, in a way, using the lack of memory, learning how to easily distract a person into, a more acceptable behavior is a real skill. But it's something that we all can learn to do. Doesn't take a professional.
Well, that's what it's all about. It's called choosing options, honoring options, and Dr. Forsyth is going to be one of the lecturers coming up Thursdays, this coming Thursday, day after tomorrow, at the Smullen Center, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then they repeat the same lecture as 7 o'clock in the evening, so whatever one works for you. And let me encourage you, if you are dealing with this in your family at any level, beginning or you're well into dementia with a loved one, this would be a tremendous resource for you. So check it out. Coming up Thursday, 2 o'clock, and again at 7 in the evening at the Smullen Center. Dr. Forsyth, thanks.
My great
Appreciate
pleasure.
what you come in.
Thank you, Perry.
We'll see you in just a few moments.
Much.